Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to the Ask the Product Manager Anything Hour on Openshift TV. Today I am joined by the highly seasoned and security-minded Kirsten Newcomer. Kirsten, please introduce yourself to the audience. Let everybody know what you're up to these days.
Hey folks, Kirsten Newcomer, focused on security for Openshift throughout the stack. That kind of means everything, right? OS level up through the applications. And today we're going to talk a little bit about our soon to be shipping compliance operator.
Awesome. And just to let you all know, kind of, fully openness here, we're talking about it, kind of at a high level, overview level here on this show. But then later today at 4 p.m. on the public sector hour on air, we'll actually be getting our hands dirty with it and installing it. So like Kirsten has a slide deck for, this show, which kind of explains the process and, why and the how. And then later we'll actually get to this is the implementation and how to use it like in your cluster kind of deal. So it'll be a pretty good day for security on the channel if you're interested in this topic, which is a highly, highly relevant topic for anyone running a hybrid cloud right now or any kind of cloud, because guess what? I bet there's a hole in it somewhere. These systems are just too complex not to be, right, Kirsten?
Absolutely. So
You got to have something watching your back is what I feel like. It's just like streaming on this channel. I always feel like there's bots and automation to kind of help me out to watch my back. I kind of want that in my cluster.
Yeah. No. In fact, when the CNCF open sourced the Kube security audit, one of the key findings was, in fact, that the main security risk is the complexity of Kubernetes.
Yeah. I mean, it's complex, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing. There is absolutely no one out there or nothing saying that like Kubernetes is easy.
Right.
Like maybe a pod is easy, but scheduling that pod is not.
No.
Right?
And then you add in, the cloud you're running on, whether it's on premises or in the public cloud, right?
Yes.
So.
And how does your cluster interact with those resources? And how does it actually scale? And how does it actually protect itself from any kind of, blast happening inside the cluster or attacks from outbound, to services that are exposed?
Yeah.
So you've got some slides
I do.
here,
Yeah.
and we have somebody kind of lurking in the dark that might ask questions every once in a while too. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott McCarty is lurking on the channel too as well, but he might be off to the side doing something else. We'll see what he chimes in with though, question-wise.
Cool. But a great partner in crime, partner in security, Father Linux, Scott McCarty. We've been working together in the container security space since I joined Red Hat. So great to have him here.
Awesome.
So as we've just been chatting about, really, you have to have strong security and compliance for an effective hybrid cloud platform. You need a lot of other things, right? But today we're going to focus on the security and compliance elements. So, and when it comes to the complexity, one of the things, and I imagine folks have heard some of this before, right? If you've been paying attention to OpenShift 4, one of the main ways that Red Hat is addressing the complexity of Kubernetes, managing Kubernetes, and in particular Kubernetes in the cloud, is with Kubernetes operators, right? Every component in OpenShift 4 is wrapped in an operator. And this actually really helps to address security as well. And as we'll talk about in OpenShift 4.6, we're adding an operator for managing compliance. So when you think about complexity, we have to think about how do we manage the machines that Kubernetes is running on, that OpenShift is running on. Although, of course, in OpenShift, right, RHEL Core OS, the machines are part of the cluster, treated as part of the cluster. How do you manage the config? How do you make sure that it's consistent? How do you, think about drift and manage for drift? And how do you ensure that when upgrades are applied, they're applied in a way that doesn't create disconnects between these different components, right?
You
And
don't
so
chaos monkey yourself on
absolutely
accident.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Accidental chaos monkey is not
Yeah,
what you want.
exactly. So OpenShift 4 like addresses all of those things with operators, machine config operators, operators that help to manage the configuration of all the other components, the operator lifecycle manager to help with managing the lifecycle. And so all of the components of OpenShift that you see here are managed with operators. And I'm not going to spend time here. We're going to bounce on and talk about a little bit the machine config operator.
Nice.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
this is an operator that kind of gives me fits sometimes, right? Like, I'll be honest, right? Like, it's complex, right? Because what it actually does is it actually takes like whatever kind of machine you want, VM, bare metal, whatever you want to call it, and manages it as part of the cluster for you.
Yeah,
And that is like highly powerful and highly complicated.
yeah, it's a new paradigm for folks, absolutely. And one of the really cool things about it, right? It's managing the operating system layer too,
Hmm.
right? And so that it allows us to manage the host OS in the same way that Kubernetes manages applications, right? So
Right.
all of OpenShift 4, I'm going to steal a line from Scott, in fact, right? We're using Kubernetes to manage Kubernetes. Um,
Yeah, which is
and
kind of like the dream, right? Like
yeah,
when it comes to dog fooding of any kind of project, right? Like your project using itself to update itself is kind of the gold standard, I feel like right now.
there you go.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing here, right? So is like because it's a container optimized operating system, because RHEL Core OS is managed as part of the cluster, we're using the machine config operator to ensure that every node on the cluster has an approved configuration. And if somehow a config change gets made that's not approved, the node is marked as degraded. And the admin then is made aware and can make an adjustment, right? So when you think about it from the security angle, managing for drift is one of the key principles that
Yes.
security teams look for.
Yes. Like I mean, this goes back to my Ansible days. Not saying that Ansible's not relevant now for doing that, but like I remember, setting up portals for data centers and, managing customer resources and stuff, like having that drift detection was a huge part of Ansible
Yeah.
because we would literally just run the playbooks every hour. And if there was drift, nope, fix it.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's now built into the machine config operator. And so and you can have more than one type of machine, right? Maybe you
Right.
have some that need GPUs installed on them. So you have a pool that for your
Hmm.
GPU nodes.
See, and
Uh,
that's where it gets like kind of squirrely for me, right?
yes, it
Like
does.
it's like, okay, I've got and Nvidia released this like $59 test card thingy, and I'm gonna bring it in, and like I've got a Dell R820 across the house, and I'm gonna hook that thing up and put it on my network and try to run OpenShift on top of that as kind of like part of a machine config operator to be like, okay, there is a GPU available in this cluster now, use it, right? Like see what you can do with it, and like the MCO is going to be a big part of me learning it,
Yep.
right? Like and how to do that,
Yep.
but it is kind of a beast as I'm learning from my coworkers and just kind of
Right.
tinkering with it myself. So the fact that
Yeah.
it has the power doesn't it shouldn't scare people, right? Because we've tested it, it's tried, it's true, it works. We constantly verify its security, but actually getting it to work how you want it in your specific environment is often a very tailored kind of thing.
Right. And so I think of that as like you're investing your time up front, right? You need
Hmm.
to define a machine config pool for all your GPU nodes, for
Right.
example.
Right.
But you're investing your time up front so that everything can be smoothed down the road, including upgrades to those
Hmm.
different systems. And of
Right,
course,
because eventually the kubelet needs to get upgraded on those
right.
boxes, right? Yeah.
Yep. And upgrades are a key part of maintaining a secure environment as well, right? There's a
Exactly.
CVE fix released.
Yeah.
Well, you want to be sure that that update for that CVE fix can be applied across all the nodes on your cluster in a seamless fashion.
Hmm.
And pre OpenShift 4, right, everybody has to manage the host OS layer themselves independently from the Kubernetes layer.
Right.
And so now
The-
with OpenShift 4, if I've got an update again, we're using Kube to manage Openshift as a Kube cluster.
Mm-hmm.
The Openshift admin says the cluster's ready for an update, selects the time, and Openshift will mark a node as ready for update, whether that updates, whatever level that update's applied, host OS, platform, Kube, logging, wherever it's applied. The workloads will be moved off that node onto other active nodes.
Mm-hmm.
The update will be applied. If it's a RHEL Core OS update, it'll be applied kind of in a static fashion. The node will be rebooted to put that update into service. The node is put back into service and then moves on to the next node.
Right.
And if you have applications who know how to work, right, they've got redundancy built in, they've got multiple instances deployed,
Mm-hmm.
you can upgrade a cluster with 0 app downtime.
Right. Like if you're doing Kubernetes right, you're doing cloud native infrastructure right, you've got the replica sets, the deployments, everything configured to do. Like, okay, I need more than one pod to actually do upgrades, right? So how many pods do I actually need to get a solid upgrade of all my clusters done and still be responsive, right? Like, so that's where the tuning and everything else of your applications come in. But it is an amazing thing to watch happen, right?
It's pretty
Like
cool. And
live.
we have had customers upgrade, say, like from 4.1 to 4.2 with 0 app downtime, for example. It's really awesome.
It's really cool to watch it happen. Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we continue, just again, kind of what are the operators that are focused on security? Which operators in particular help with security? There's the container security operator, which today is integrated with Quay, with Claire. If you deploy the container security operator onto your cluster, you'll get information about any images that are running on your cluster that have known vulnerabilities, as long as those vulnerabilities are known to Claire, to Quay with Claire.
Right.
We're planning to open that up to allow our partners to integrate with that as well.
Cool.
But today it is really available with Quay with Claire. The good thing is, even if you're not using Quay as your enterprise registry, all of the Red Hat images that you have pulled from registry, .redhat.com, registry.io, you're going to be able to see vulnerability data about your Red Hat content directly in the cluster with the container security operator.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. All right, so what's coming next?
Yeah.
We have got a big focus on compliance in 4.6.
That's a lot.
So, well, not all of this, I should say, not everything on this list.
I was about to say
4.6.
Okay, so this is future. This is future and beyond the future
This
release
is
of
right.
4.6.
Yeah, and as we go through, I'll be clear about what's coming in 4.6
Okay.
and what's coming later.
I was about to say, if we're tackling all this in one release,
Yeah,
wow.
man, we can't do it all in one. So,
Yeah.
but these are the regulations, right, that
Absolutely.
you all out there need to deal with.
Yeah.
So if
Like
you're in
CIS, I feel like is like become the bare minimum nowadays, right?
It really
Like,
has, absolutely. And one of the things about CIS, and we've really kind of been starting to work more closely directly with CIS on this, is that they have now recognized that as Kubernetes distributions have become like Linux distributions, that they've moved beyond the idea of a single CIS benchmark, right? There used to just be the CIS Kubernetes benchmark. But now there are multiple CNCF certified distributions of Kubernetes, and you'll start to see in the CIS that they have benchmarks for different distributions. So we're working directly with CIS to publish a CIS Openshift benchmark.
nice.
Yeah, because in fact, the way we
Wow.
harden
Nice.
Openshift is different, right? If you were to take a vanilla Kube benchmark and use the audit commands there, they wouldn't work, in part because we're using operators to do all the configs. And so you have to actually have audit commands that know how to find the operator configs.
Right.
So we've been spending a lot of time.
Otherwise, it would just be looking at nothing.
Right. It would not know where to find things. But we are, all of these items are relevant to our customers, and therefore we're investing in all of them. I will say also that one of the good things, and if anybody's ever, like if you know the Cloud Security Alliance, they do this, they publish this regular matrix of how all of the regulatory controls map to each other. So they kind of have on the right-hand side of this matrix, sorry, left-hand side of the spreadsheet, all the controls, and across horizontally, they have all the different frameworks. And they overlap, which helps
Right.
us
Yeah.
get to a place where we can actually deliver the controls, because once we start doing one set, again, we can chip away at the other frameworks. So that said, right, if you don't have automation, compliance is complex. There's a wide range of elements to compliance. Some are technical controls, some are process controls, some are people controls. And so kind of for somebody who's doing this in their environment for a deployment, right, compliance is typically applied to a deployment rather than a product. You have to kind of have somebody who helps you think across all of these controls, which are the ones that matter to your environment based on the frameworks that you care about, who's going to implement which controls, how do you assess those, how do you get your auditor to sign off, and then how do you do ongoing monitoring of all those controls. And so Red Hat has been investing in automation in this space for some time, actually.
Oh, long time. Yeah.
Yep. So if you think about RHEL, right, we've been doing SCAP. SCAP stands for Security Content Automation Protocol. We've been doing SCAP, OpenSCAP Scanner, which is a NIST certified scanner, and Ansible for remediation for quite some time. So we deliver, like if you can boot your RHEL system with PCI DSS compliance, you can boot it for DISASTIG, you can, there's kind of you can do HIPAA. And we're taking the same approach with Openshift, right? We're just moving that up the stack. And you want to remember when we say Openshift 4, it's everything. It's Openshift and RHEL Core OS together, right?
Right. And Openshift includes the monitoring and the logging and the auditing and the security controls and everything else on top of Kubernetes to make it actually like a full-fledged enterprise distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want security to be declarative, just the way
Our
Kubernetes is a declarative environment,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So so we've got this operator coming in 4.6. 4.6 will be out in a couple of weeks. We continue to use OpenSCAP because it is a NIST certified tool. And our technical controls will be written in SCAP so that it helps to support, in fact, our public sector customers, but not just public sector, right? We have other customers these days who are really following public sector lead and become familiar.
I just think of anybody manufacturing anything nowadays, right? Like if you're actually like one of my former jobs, I used to work at Cree and they grew LED crystals in house. That was a highly sensitive and protected operation because it was very patented. So like they actually applied higher standards themselves and said, no, we must have these kinds of things in place, even though like the industry didn't necessarily have a regulatory body saying they had to. They put it in place themselves because they knew it would help them in the long term.
Yep, makes total sense. And then as we look at, right, with so many more industries, people in different industries working from home these days due to coronavirus, there's this stronger emphasis on security and making sure that, the environment that everybody's connecting to remotely is secure.
Right.
And also, we think this is likely to go on for a while. And we're also starting to see an acceleration of plans to move to public cloud, right?
Yeah. If you go look at the latest whatever filings, SEC filings for Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the big cloud vendors, they're all up and to the right. So that's what we're kind of seeing too. So but that security and compliance piece is always that. Like how do you, like that's always a question. Like how do you do security? How do you keep us safe? I feel like is always a customer question.
Right. And right, so we want to make sure that you have a way to do that to meet not just regulatory compliance, but perhaps your own internal security requirements, and that you have a way to do that that is common across any deployment you have, whether that's on premises, whether that's AWS, Google, Azure, wherever you are, our goal is to make it easy for
Hmm.
you to manage and maintain your cluster in the same way, right? So
Right.
that you don't have to redo your operational procedures for every deployment you do.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Like you just add another machine and it gets
yeah,
new configs applied as the rest of the machines in the config
yeah.
pool, and off it goes.
You move from AWS to Google for some reason, or you want an AWS cluster and a Google cluster.
Right.
You can ensure with the Openshift compliance operator that you have automated compliance with technical controls that matter to you in the way that you expect, no matter where your cluster runs.
Right. And by the way, yeah, it's generic compute you're dealing with too. So it's probably the cheapest way to run a big fat, not big fat, but enterprise level, secured consistently between
Yeah,
multi, kind of hybrid cloud environments. I don't know of a better way. Like you can't put the same controls in place for AKS, EKS, XKS, whatever, as you can with OpenShift in a
yeah,
consistent and not consolidated, but
yeah,
just consistent and stable manner,
yeah,
right? Like where you know that just because you deploy it doesn't mean you have to go secure it next, right? Like it's part of the process. It's
yep.
not an extra step in the process.
Absolutely. And so we were talking earlier about the range of compliance frameworks
Hmm.
that are out there in the world that our folks, that folks who use OpenShift need to think about and comply with. And so in 4.6, when we ship and with the compliance operator, first release of the compliance operator, we'll have a limited set of checks, primarily focused on compliance checks on RHEL Core OS. And
Hmm.
one of the big value adds there, right, is that because Core OS is a container optimized operating system, a
Mm.
lot of security teams aren't familiar with how it's secured.
Yeah.
And so being able to show via automation, via an automated output, here's the kinds of controls, technical controls that these teams are used to thinking about,
Hmm.
and to show that those are complied with is a big win, right? It helps put to rest a bunch of questions.
Right, because I mean, when I go out to talk, or when I used to go out to talk to customers, now I just sit here and talk to customers. They would always ask, right? Like, how do I get XYZ security agent running? And it's always like this paradigm shift that you immediately have to talk about. And it's like, okay, if we could expose some of these things that these
Yep.
various agents that are out there doing OS security, like by default, that'd be great. And this kind of answers that question.
Yeah, so it gives you a way. And so again, we're going to use a project. Everything we do is upstream, right? There's
Hmm.
something called compliance as code on GitHub. You can see the compliance profiles that are available. As we productize those, the way the compliance operator works, right? It's an optional operator. You choose to deploy it to your cluster. You pick a profile from those available, and when they're productized, they'll be delivered as containers. And you pick a profile. You tell the operator to run that profile. It's going to use OpenSCAP to actually do the scan. You can tell it which, we were mentioned briefly machine config pools earlier. You can tell it whether you want to run it, the scan on all the nodes, on a subset of the nodes organized by machine config pools. You kind of, it goes, it runs, it checks all of the technical controls that are in that list. It outputs results. And then those results can be examined by accreditors or auditors. You can automate remediation if you wish, or you
Hmm.
can choose to do some of the remediation manually.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, there's some things you do. Um, Someone just asked me for the GitHub link. I just dropped it in,
sure.
but let me drop it again. It's compliance as code, just all one word, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I already found it. Cool.
Okay.
The sorry, please continue.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And I was just going to say, so an example of a kind of configurable control, actually back to the CIS benchmarks. So when 4.6 ships, we won't have all of the checks for the CIS benchmark. We're actively working on writing those in SCAP now. And so we will be delivering updated profiles, content for compliance checks, probably about every 2 months. We're hoping to do it more quickly than that, but we'll see how that goes. And we're going to shoot for about every 2 months. The CIS benchmark is our next target. So we expect we'll have that by the end of this year.
Cool.
Yep. Hopefully,
fingers crossed. Yeah.
November, December. So hopefully sooner than later. One of the cool things, though, is that actually the majority of the CIS benchmark controls, a lot of them are about file permissions, file ownership. There's a whole section on that. We're pretty much compliant out of the box.
Yeah, I can't see how we couldn't be with.
Yeah, it's just that we haven't.
Under the hood. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't been able to give customers an automated way to demonstrate that until now. One of the things that is optional, so we're also, one of the things that is optional is Xcd encryption. That's intentionally optional. CIS recommends it, doesn't require it. And
there's a reason for that.
There is. It's not everybody wants to do it. Not everybody feels they need to. Apologies for the outdoor noise. I don't know how.
No worries.
Because I could try and move.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay, good.
I think what most people, when they say like, oh, Xcd encryption, right? Like there's a huge performance hit to that too, right?
Well,
for some organizations, depending upon how your stuff is architected, right?
Right. It's I wouldn't have called it a huge performance hit, but it can be enough that people, for example, who are like, there are certain scenarios where you're so performance sensitive that you don't want to do it.
Right. And if you're doing like, what's it called? Like high value or high frequency trading, that performance hit is noticeable.
Right.
Whereas if I'm doing like newspaper publishing, it's not.
Right. Or and another reason people might not do it, they might choose to store their application secrets, which are the more critical secrets, in a separate location, right? They don't store them in Etcd. And then you've just limited Etcd to platform data.
Yeah. And that's, that's kind of what, I think we typically recommend, right? Like, if people want to keep it all in cluster, fine. There's ways to do that, but we typically recommend that like, you use an operator that works with another secret store that manages those secrets separately for you.
Yeah, for security conscious customers, using an external vault for their app secrets is a great thing to do. So,
and we'll be talking about, sealed secrets and vaults and all that fun stuff on the channel later in the coming weeks. So stay tuned, folks.
So I'm trying to think what else in here we might want to hit. This is just kind of a chart that gives you an idea of what, if you're not that familiar with compliance, what kinds of controls are put in place, what are people checking for. They're going to look, for example, for session management, for token inactivity timeout. It's
like we've learned from the cloud, right? Like, we know that having some token sitting out there for 764 days unused is bad, right? Like, so we put that in here now.
Authorization, right? Openshift has RBAC on by default. A whole range of things like that. And again, many of these controls, TLS cert management, right, is often a big part. Auditability, right? Do you have the ability to audit events? At what level is auditing happening? All of that kind of thing comes in. This is just a graphic, and it sounds like y'all will have a chance to do some hands-on later. But just to kind of give you an idea of the flow, we've sort of spoken to this already. So again, you pick a suite or a profile. The scan that's handed off to the OpenSCAP engine. Scan is run against, again, one or more machine config pools. Scan results are then fed to a compliance checklist, and you can choose to remediate or not. I'm going to skip. Oh, I should mention, for folks who are familiar with OpenSCAP in RHEL, you can use it for vulnerability scanning as well as compliance scanning. For right now in 4.6, we're focused on compliance scanning.
Which makes sense.
Vulnerability scanning on a cluster is something we're evaluating, but that's a down the road sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's a big thing to take on too, right? Because you're talking about like doing vulnerability scanning for potentially any kind of application that could run on OpenShift, which is literally everything. So
Yeah, except, and that's a really good point, Chris, because in
yeah,
fact, Red Hat focuses on vulnerabilities for Red Hat data.
right.
And typically our partners are the ones who focus much more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
That said, with Quay and Claire, we are starting to expand the data set that
Mm-hmm.
Claire can recognize for vulnerability scanning.
Absolutely.
But when we think about the model too, right, everything is intended to be immutable and reproducible from code on
Mm-hmm.
OpenShift. So you really should be doing your vulnerability scanning, whether it's for the platform or the apps, you should be doing it pre-deployment.
Exactly.
Right? You
Yeah.
should be doing it in the registry, in your mirrored registry for
Mm-hmm.
Quay.io, wherever it is. That's where it should be happening. You really want to shift that security left, and running vulnerability scans on a operating system where the user is read-only, and
Mm-hmm.
on your OpenShift platform where, again, everything's deployed as images by operators, the config is managed by operators. Not sure that that's really worth the time.
Right. You gotta, I mean, you have limited time as a,
Yeah,
security engineer, security professional. Put your time into the
yeah,
automation so that the automation can help save you time later so that you
right.
can do more
Right. And
faster.
yeah, and I was talking with one of my colleagues about resiliency as well recently,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the key things, again, we're talking infrastructure and applications as code here.
Yeah.
So we do have OpenShift customers who design their environment so that they can tear down and redeploy from code every 30 days.
Yeah. Which is cool.
It is. And if you're doing that, right, and then your apps get redeployed from your CI/CD pipeline.
Right.
So again, that just emphasizes that you want to do that vulnerability scanning pre-deployment.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you can do it in the pipeline to where it doesn't,
Yeah,
impact some kind of other operation,
yeah,
at the same time, right? Like sooner is better than later.
yep,
Um, before deployment, always. Uh, and like literally any container should be scanned
yep,
right off the bat. If it's going into any cluster anywhere, that container should be scanned right off the bat.
yeah, cool. All right, that's a report. Eventually, right, we'll be giving some sort of human readable kind of report, like you can't read in this screenshot on the left here. Um, and
Human readable.
yeah, really teeny, teeny,
Right.
teeny text. And then here you can kind of get an idea. This is, we are actively working with DISA on a STIG for both RHEL 8 and RHEL
Nice.
Core OS.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of an idea of what that might look like when we get there. Um,
Love my friends at DISA. Worked with them for
yeah,
a
no,
long
and I
time.
should
Yeah.
I should say we don't have a predicted timeline. We're in process with them. The team that's talking with at 4 o'clock, the North America public sector team, they're
Mhm.
directly involved, but I'm told maybe Q1 of 2021.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, we've got this stuff on our radar, folks, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. So one other thing coming in 4.6 is the file integrity
Oh,
operator.
cool.
So
Okay, I already like the look of this.
so So again, a really common element of compliance frameworks is file integrity management.
Hmm.
It's one of the reasons sometimes that folks are used to deploying those agents you mentioned, Chris,
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
operating systems, right? And so AID is available on RHEL. It
Hmm.
stands for Advanced Intrusion Detection Engine.
Yep.
Um, and so we're going to leverage it as well for file integrity checking on RHEL Core OS. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so you'll be able to kind of list the set of files that you want to be sure you're checking for regular ongoing integrity. Again, we wouldn't expect much change because
Right.
slash
Yeah.
user and RHEL Core OS is read only. But again, one of the challenges with compliance is that the auditing, the regulations and the auditors have a hard time keeping up with changing technology.
Yeah.
And so we want to give you the tools you need to show your auditors that you're meeting their requirements.
Right. Because the various auditors are kind of driven by the market too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the market they catch up to it.
Yep.
And having to, having this file integrity operator there, I feel like is this available to like workloads, that like, could I put this into my application as a
Yeah.
separate kind of thing, or is this cluster only right now? Where is
Right.
this kind of
Yep.
sitting?
Right now, cluster only.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
but definitely, if folks are interested in something for the workload, reach out, shoot us a note. But
Yeah.
we're really focused at the cluster, at the platform level for right now. So you build up your database of files that you want to monitor. A hash is created for each of those, and then you can regularly scan to ensure that the hash for the file is not changed.
It's almost like, I hate to use the term, it's almost like a blockchain for your infrastructure, right? Like you've got hashed, values for each file on your file system, and if it doesn't compare, or if it doesn't, like, if there's diff, something's going to be there to fix it for you, right? Like, and it's going to be very, very automated,
Right. Or
potentially,
initially,
or it could be just, hi,
something's going
something's
to
wrong here.
notify you. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Automation, it's one of the interesting, actually, tensions that we've had around the machine config operator is whether to, automatically
Go
remediate
ahead and do it or
or
not.
just notify. And
Yeah.
so there are choices made around that are somewhat intentional and based on, so right now, at least at the host OS level, it's more about notification. We may determine down the road that we can automate that remediation, but we're also trying to keep pace with what are our customers comfortable with.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
it's such a delicate balance, right? Like, and I always say this, like, security is always going to be in conflict with ease of use.
agility.
Right? Like, yeah, perfect point. Security and agility. Boom. It's like a car crash test.
Yeah.
So like, you've got to be able to, like, say, hey, old security standard, new security standard, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I comply.
Right.
And I think putting this into Openshift is going to help a lot of people in the long term for a lot of problems that, like, they have right now with compliance and regulatory and auditing kind of
and
issues.
as we've been saying, right, one of the ways you get agility with security is with automation.
Bingo.
And so that's the goal.
Yeah, like, it's been a long time since I've, like, manually applied updates to a system.
Yep.
Right. Like, seriously, it's been a very long time since I've done that. I think it's only been on Windows boxes because of, like, oh my God, kind of vulnerabilities, right? Like, but that's it, right?
Yep.
Like, all my, Unix systems in the house, everything gets updated automatically, right? Like, I don't spend time doing updates.
Yep.
Right. Like, unless something breaks, which is super, super rare. And I'm talking like at the host bare metal level, VMs is even rarer, right? Like, when I'm talking about my OpenShift cluster. So like, where are we going? Where's the future?
Yeah. So
everything.
For those who are aware of Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager, they have a governance risk and compliance framework that is part of the ACM offering. And their compliance framework will be leveraging the compliance operator. So we have been working with them on enabling the integration that will be, now that the compliance operator is coming with 4.6. So we will be providing, they kind of deliver, they do these integrations through what they call policy. So we'll be providing a policy script that will first be available in the community version of their repo. So you'll have the opportunity to try that out with the compliance operator. And then over time, that will move to the stable channel. I don't yet have an exact timeline for that. We're thinking Q1 2021.
Sure.
But so if you've got multiple clusters, and again, if we think about this, we do have customers who use more than one public cloud or use public cloud plus on-prem.
You
need a way
various hypervisors in that on-premises situation. Yeah,
you need a way to manage across all those clusters. ACM gives you that way. And again, in combination with the compliance operator, you can manage compliance in exactly the same automated fashion across all those clusters.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, this is just a little bit more about when we expect profiles to be delivered, right? We are working on the CIS benchmark. Also on the STIG, as I mentioned, and FSMA moderate is a big target for us. However, it is a large set of controls. So we'll kind of be doing that incrementally over time.
That makes sense. I like that. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to blow up anybody's FSMA model because that would be bad.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's customers that are like, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. But there's probably a lot of customers that are like, don't break this, don't break this, don't break this, don't break this too. So it's that
Yeah.
very delicate balance again.
Yeah. And the good news again, though, is that, many of the controls, especially in FSMA, overlap with the controls in PCI DSS or in ISO 27001, HIPAA. So we'll have an opportunity. I actually should move Australia Essential 8, probably should be moved to near term. For anybody who's listening from APAC.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, some of our team in Australia actually delivered the SCAP content for that.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good for them. No, like the Australia Essential 8, I think is like, Australia doing their own thing as far as compliance and what they think is the right standard. But
Yep.
it's a step in the right direction, right? In my opinion, right? Like the more the merrier, right? That's kind of my opinion.
Absolutely. And many regions have their own, both regions and verticals, different industries have their own compliance. And again, mostly the goal, the controls are the same. They maybe just organize them a little differently, they word them a little differently. And so in general, they should be, all these different controls, technical controls are generally useful. You'll also have the ability to customize policies. Say you have some internal technical controls that aren't outlined by the regulatory framework. You'll have the ability to add those custom policy sets. And that's kind of, and then of course, since 4.6 is our first release of both the compliance operator and then file integrity operator, we're looking forward to feedback and continuing to kind of improve those solutions over time. We're also looking at how can we help customers get better advantage of SE Linux. SE Linux is on by default in Openshift. It protects against container runtime escapes. But
so many things we've protected people from.
Absolutely. But it's not easy for the general developer out there to take advantage of. And so
that's fair.
If you want to get fancy with it, kind of the SE Linux policy operator, its goal would be to analyze an application that you've built, a container image, operator, whatever you're working with, and suggest some additional SE Linux controls that could help tighten the security of that particular element. So without you having to understand SE Linux or do anything much with it. So,
yeah, that's pretty cool.
All right. And that's what I had. Happy to, follow up with questions or see if there's anything else people would like to chat about.
Well, our big heavy hitter security-wise, Waleed just came into the channel. So we'll see what he has to say.
Right.
But question was, does every Red Hat employee get a Red Hat? And the answer is yes, we all do. Although I believe Kirsten's hat, is that a Red Hat? Or
no, this is my Red Hat
this
fedora.
Is your Red Hat? Okay,
it is cool. My Red Hat fedora. I bring it out for sessions like this.
Nice.
I do have a lot of other hats, though. It's true. But
yes, you do, and they are all lovely. And if I would go for it, well, actually, I can reach it. Yeah, mine is right here in our window. So we all get one at orientation, and even our digital orientations now they get shipped. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So some questions. Can Cryo be compatible with OCP 4.6? Yes. All OCI compliant or OCI adherent container runtimes will work in Openshift.
Yeah. Well, and Cryo is our default runtime for Openshift 4. So any container image, though if you build your image with Docker or some other tooling, it will run in Openshift as long as it's OCI compliant.
Cool. So next question, and this might be a wild card for you. There might not be a right answer to this, and that's totally fine. But it is an interesting question nonetheless. I need to check how I can only enable image policies to a selected list of
Ah,
images, not registries. Any
okay.
input there? Any feedback there? That
I'm
is Waleed, our friend from Saudi Arabia. So yeah, I
aha.
told you he'd have a good question for
Yeah.
you.
So, it's interesting. I was just thinking about Andy Block might have some good thoughts on that, but he's not with us at the moment. So, at the moment, as you're probably aware, right, that the admission controllers, the plugins are
Oh, sorry, Waleed.
cross cluster, right?
Hmm.
And so, the one thing that maybe comes to mind, I don't know if you've explored OPA Gatekeeper at all, Waleed.
Open
Um,
Gatekeeper, yeah, that's a
yeah,
good one.
OPA,
OPA,
OPA
OPA,
Gatekeeper. Yep,
Gatekeeper. Yeah,
yep,
yeah,
yep.
yeah. I
It's
said that
starting.
fast, and that
It's
came out
okay.
wrong. I realize now. Wait, I did say that wrong.
Yeah, yeah. It's starting to get a lot of traction out there.
Yeah.
And also, kind of on a related note, right? ACM has the ability to apply policies per application. Again, ACM, primarily design, it's designed to do multi-cluster management, but it does more than that. It also allows you to do kind of apply policy by application. And so it might be that both those paths are things that you want to explore, because most of the admission controllers, they're across cluster.
Hmm.
And so I would take a look both at, learn more about Red Hat ACM and kind of go explore OPA Gatekeeper and see if there's something there that looks interesting.
Yeah, OPA is a pretty hot commodity right now. If you're in the
Yes.
security realm
Yeah.
and you're looking at, trying to do anything in cloud native space, highly recommend looking at Open Policy Agent
Yeah.
and what's going on in that realm, that project in general. I'm a big fan of it. I wish I could spend more time working in it, to be honest with you, but my plate
Yeah.
is pretty full.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, that's good advice. OPA Gatekeeper. I can link to that too,
Yeah.
so folks don't have to go hunt for it because that's my job here. Um, any other questions, folks? Feel free to fire away. Open Policy Agent Gatekeeper and GitHub. There we go. Copy pasta time. All right. So, uh, can you share the slides? Well, guess
Sure.
what? I've
I'm
already done
gonna.
that.
All right. I was just gonna make one tweak, but that's cool.
Oh,
Just
were
share
you?
what you
Oh,
got.
sorry.
Well, I do. No, no, that's fine. No
I can
worries at
edit
all.
it later.
Yep.
Yeah, I always try to grab them midstream and put them up, but
Yep.
that rarely ends up always working out. So yeah, there's the slides, and yeah, Waleed just dropped academy.styra.com into the links to it's a free Rego and OPA course. So
Ah,
I might check that out,
cool.
so see how good it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's handy. Thank you, Waleed. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Um, so yeah, Narindev, take note of that. OPA is good for you and good for me. Um, Narindev is our what? How should I describe him? Our constant thirst for knowledge. Just he's constantly searching for new things to learn, and it's very refreshing that he
Yeah.
joins us and shares what he's learned along the way too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't think there's anything else gonna come in, to be honest with you, question wise.
Yeah.
But Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us on the channel today. It was a super, super great talk, and I look further to diving in a little further. Oh, hang on. This is probably an incredibly simple question, but is there any practical advantage to Openshift for hobbyist users who are at a scale where the overhead of managing their cluster is still negligible? I have never looked at it.
Huh.
Huh.
Well, I wonder if
OKD might be
yeah,
the
or
right answer for you. PSI 4, maybe that would be
yeah.
a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the truth is it really, so for example, I, in order to do some experimentation and testing, I deployed a cluster on AWS that
Hmm.
I can spin up and shut down
Hmm.
kind of as needed based on
Yeah.
what exploration I need to do. And that was so easy to do
Hmm.
that, I- y- you know, and I just have 3 masters and 3 worker nodes, the default config.
Right.
So even if it's not a large cluster, it's so much easier to install and manage and keep
Yeah.
updated. You just don't have as much to think about. So I would
Right.
say that, yeah, there is an advantage.
I would say that anybody running a Kubernetes cluster for something they care about, doing it with a distribution of sorts is probably better than doing it with, whatever comes out of K/K.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, can we install Openshift in the new Graviton nodes in AWS? So Openshift on ARM, I think, is in the works ish.
I honestly don't have that in front of me.
I don't either.
Yeah.
So the answer is not yet, Waleed, but the details will probably be coming in some future release about ARM.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it's on our radar for
It
sure.
is. Yep, absolutely.
I know there's been talks about it
Yeah.
for sure. So yeah, if you go to the link I just dropped in chat a second ago, I'll drop it again just because I can. You can go spin up your own instance of OpenShift kind of wherever you want. We even have the assisted installer that actually got generated an ISO for me to install it on my bare metal cluster here in the house. So there's a lot of different ways to install OpenShift these days. And if you want to use the upstream version of OpenShift, it's called OKD. And that is available at okd.io, which is fully open source, no license required, no fancy thing. So yes, Narinda, you can't do it on AWS technically for free because we don't use free tier nodes, but yeah, you could spin up a cluster and pay for however long you need on AWS. Done. And just shut it off when you're done. And actually I turn off my bare metal cluster, after turning it on within 24 hours, it also just completely blows away its cert. But yeah, I have turned it on overnight or turned it off overnight several times and not had an issue with it.
They've
And even if I
actually
did, I would just blow it away and
right.
start over.
They've actually, to the best of my knowledge, you might have done this more, Chris, but they've addressed some of the issues with the cert.
Oh, okay, good.
So you have to leave it up for at least 24 hours at first to get past that first rotation.
Okay.
But in fact, I've shut mine off over the weekend. I've shut it
Ooh.
off for days at a time and brought it back up.
Nice.
So with 4.5, I've been running 4.5. So.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's good to hear. So yeah, maybe I can actually save some power over weekends and stuff now. Okay. Fun. Well, great. That's good to learn. Is there any runtime scanner eBPF based on the feature roadmap?
Good question.
That is a good question. Yeah.
No, we've definitely are looking into eBPF. It's actually a very popular topic of conversation at Red Hat these days. We're also and related to that, we are investing in enhanced visibility and observability for the networking layers.
Yes.
And that absolutely is tied to eBPF, right? Being able to get better data, kernel level and networking level data. So yes, I don't have a timeline for you, but yep, we're looking into it.
Yeah, we're looking into eBPF, and as Waleed points out, Sysdig is a partner of ours.
Absolutely.
They're operators and Operator Hub right now.
Yep.
You can totally go ahead and grab that and use that for the time being until we get something baked in. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable.
Yep. Sysdig, and I believe Aqua is also using eBPF.
Aqua
and possibly Twistlock, which is now Palo Alto Prisma.
Yeah, I didn't know what to call them, but yes, that one. Yeah, I think they are using eBPF as well. So yeah, there's a few options out there actually. So yeah, please feel free to kick the tires on any of those on Operator Hub and see which works best for you. I did a show, another one I missed. Yes. Oh yeah, I did do a show with the folks over at Sysdig.
Good
Dan,
folks.
Papa, Andrea. They're awesome. I love working with them on stuff. So, and I think they're gonna have me on one of their shows here in the near future. I forget
Nice.
when, but yeah.
Yeah.
There were 2 Sysdig shows, says Narindev. Yeah, maybe. We had Dan and then
You know, sometimes Red Hat, we don't
yeah.
know, like different people are working with them and not everybody knows.
Not everybody knows when there's a show, but I think we
Yeah.
did have a show about the operator itself from Red
Uh-huh.
Hatters, I think. But anyways, yeah, just head up the YouTube playlist, and I've already dropped a link to that, but I will drop it again, and just because I can, and links are fun. And you will have the ability to go through all of the OpenShift TV archive and watch whatever pleases you the most, and use the fun of Google search to do that. So yeah, again, I want to thank you, Kirsten, for coming and joining us
My
today,
pleasure. Yeah.
and thank you all in the audience for joining us. We'll be back here in about an hour for talking about Istio with the OpenShift Commons briefing team. So that'll be fun.
All right.
Look forward to seeing that. So yeah, and we're good to go. So thank you again, and we will catch you all later.